preliminary round of NUDC 2024. Congratulations for making this so far. My name is Manda, with the chair for this round. Just several quick reminder before we begin the debate. First of all, I believe that LO will also help you to keep timing the debate, so please make sure that you also listen to the bell that is ring by the LO, or at least you can see as well my notice. I will raise my hand in case the time is over. It means that judges will not take anything after the time is over. But second of all, to make sure that you use your microphone properly, since this is going to be live streaming, and make sure as well that your voice is audible and you can check before you start the speech. All right, with that being said, I'd like to welcome the Prime Minister to open the debate for the round. Here.
Okay, yeah, I'm Rama from IPB. I would like to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. There is this glorification of summer of women that exists in status quo, which by the end manifests in 3 things. One, there is lots of references to this idea of how feminism is actually look like into this work of art. Example like the Era Store of Barbie movie that people would cite to and recommend you to actually watch this movie because it's basically contain the ideal manifestation of feminism. But second, there's lots of advocacy and discourse that was going to happen in status quo, and the portrayal of that this summer of woman is basically the ideal case of how feminism. I think it's not going to be bring much more benefit in status quo, and instead going to bring much more harm, because we believe that it's basically a radical movement. We would like to tell you why it is included into a radical movement, because the portrayal, there's lots of portrayal in this art that portray that female do not need male. Example, in Barbie movie, that there is a scene where Barbie do not need Ken, etc. And there is a scene where a woman need to be independent, like in the Barbie movie, right? And there's lots of in Era Store song of Taylor Swift example that portraying how women do not need male and they can be an independent and pursue anything they want, which is portrayed as something that have much more power in status quo of society, right? Let's bring several analysis to the status quo. One, let's analyze how is the summer of woman is actually going to be interact as a object in the status quo. One, they basically an art that we know that it is an expression of human emotion, but B, it's basically a soft approach of advocacy that is go into this feminist movement, because by the end of the day there is lots of things that going inputted into this work of art. But C, they actually have a big basis and massive discourse that's going to be happening from the very first place, because they have lots of fans, they have big fans and exposure, because they have big budget in promotion and stuff. In comparison, while feminism movement in general, in advocacy and traditional way, do not have this. So this is really exclusive, come from the summer of movement. But second of all, the characteristic of their fans is they really fanatic and they see how these actors or singers is basically their role model, and basically these people would by the end of the day listen to this. So this movement would automatically have their own listener of their own followers from the very first place, right? But then we see but then second contribution, the idea that they deliver, we believe is basically really extreme. It's really extremist, and we believe it's not linear to the most feminist willingness, because the impact they would by the end of the day do advocacy by of this summer of woman, but B, we believe it's also a misinterpretation into what is the ideal case of feminism, because what we want as feminists is that we want every woman to be able to pursue anything they want. We don't need women to be independent. We need women to be actually able to express themselves. Either it's going to be an independent woman that's work outside of the house, or maybe being a housewife that is obey their husband, for example, because by the end, feminist is a life choice that goes into each woman itself, right? But then the impact, it's going to be ruin the effort that we already built in status quo as a feminist movement, because by the end, there's a lot of misinterpretation that exists in the Summer of Women, and we see how Summer of Women also have lots of exposure. That's why it can get easily misinterpreted, right? We see how we already tried to advocate all of this equality from the very first place in 4 waves even. We try to advocate that women have to need education, need to have similar rights and etc. And women don't need to be superior than women, and we basically need all of the women. Even we try to accommodate the LGBTQ community into this feminist movement. That's why we try to be an inclusive movement from the very first place, right? But then B, it's but then third contribution is who we actually try to advocate as a feminist movement, and why the Summer of Women would not be able to advocate this actor. One, we try to advocate women that they are we want this woman to feel that they are valuable. But B, we want to also advocate the male the male human that is in gray area or even in conservative area that still stick into a tradition and conservative tradition, so that they by the end of the day will be able to lead the family in the most ideal way and do not by the end under-glorify the woman itself. And the discourse is actually be able to reach this actor, right? We believe this misinterpretation that goes into the Summer of Women is really dangerous to this feminist movement, because one, it's basically not an ideal value, and B, there's also an anti-feminist movement in this status quo, and it is really massive. We will prove to you why. Analysis of anti-feminist people is that one, they are not gonna listen from you from the very first place, and B, they are really vocal to their opinion from the very first place, right? We see how in status quo there is lots of advocacy from ultra-religious community, like there is lots of a movement in Indonesia even, I don't want to mention him, or maybe there's a content creator like Andrew Tate, Sigma Male, Peaky Blinders, and etc. And they try to basically neutralize or debunk every feminist movement that exists in status quo, right? That is our revolt. If we by the end advocate wrong things that is going to be misinterpreted, it's going to be happen bad. How? The portraying is they're going to giving a different antithesis of the advocacy, which is one, women already get enough of this equity that they already go into a certain point that they don't need to find this equality anymore. But B, women already seek for supremacy this time, so that this would by the end debunk the interest, the point of feminists, so that people would not want to opt in into the movement of feminists, which by the end we believe it's really the biggest interest of feminists that is gain much more followers from the very first place, right? But then C, they also would be able to portray how feminist is an inconsistent movement, which there's lots of spectrum that goes into feminist. There is example, there is lots of people that want to be superior, but on the other hand, there's also the much more traditional and conservative feminists that just want to be able to be heard from the very first place, right? That's what would happen. But fifth contribution, the impact to this it's going to be impacting to the much people's perception by the advocacy of these antithesis of the feminism itself. One, it's going to be impacting the progressive woman, which would be seen as an ideal woman by feminist movement, but by the end, yet going to be judged by anti-feminist movement from the very first place. But second, it's going to be impacting to the conservative woman, which what they want is just to mind their own businesses and be led by a man and being a housewife, for example. The impact, there would be a standardization that women have to be an independent, while not every woman want to be like that. Vote for OG.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for that fine speech. Now I'd like to invite Leader of Opposition to open the case in opposition side. Here.
It's on airplane mode. I am opening my stopwatch. Checking. Audible? Good evening. I am Audi Feral Limpuang from Universitas KRISTEN Petra. I am leader of the opposition. Allow me 5 seconds to organize my notes. I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. First, let me rebut a few of the cases that the PM has brought. The PM has said that the Summer of Women 2023 is a radical movement, precisely because it advocates for independence of women, precisely because it glorifies and empowers women by this idea that they can pursue everything and anything. However, we would like to question this characterization because it is ultimately a movement that is globally accepted, that is globally undertaken by a lot of people. A lot of people watch Barbie and like it. Men and women, feminists, non-feminists. So how can it be so radical if it is so widely adopted by so many people? We do not understand. Second, it is they say that it is a misinterpretation of the ideal form of feminism. We need a feminism that is more inclusive. We need a feminism that are not saying that the only way for a woman to succeed in equal rights is for them to be independent. However, we believe that it is not within the women movement's interest to dictate what is the ideal form of feminism, as long as it leads to better visibility of women's issues, better advocation, and better visibility of women's issues, better advocation, and ultimately better feminist movement. We do not think that the enforcement of an ideal form of feminism is at all within the movement's interest. First, let's characterize the status quo. There is a very heavy urgency for the Summer of Women to be glorified. Why? We live in a world in which the anti-feminist movement is, in some extent, exceeding. How does this look like? This looks like Roe v. Wade, reproductive rights being overturned in the United States. This looks like major world leaders like Jacinda Ardern, who managed to accomplish so much during her time in the office, still being questioned. How can you do all of that while also being a woman, while also being a mother? And the fact that she resigned shortly before this Summer of Women thing, we are having a feminist movement that is heavily demoralized by setbacks towards the things that the feminist movement have been fighting for, things like reproductive rights, things like better visibility. So why is it then that this setback must be fought with glorification of the Summer of Movement by glorifying the Taylor Swift Eras Tour, by the Beyonce tour, by the Barbie movie? Precisely because these pop culture things are things that have a global reach. There is a saying, the Estadio Americana in Brazil can only be silenced by 3 people, the Pope, Pelé, and Freddie Mercury. The two of the things mentioned there, organized religion and sports, are highly unlikely to advance the feminist movement. Therefore, we need this liberal establishment in the United States that heavily dominate the entertainment industry to be the advocate to give the women the win that they so desperately need to fight this demoralization that they are currently suffering under the status quo. And why is this important? Because ultimately, the feminist movement can be fractured, can be whatever, but if they are not being paid attention to by the public, every point these women are privileged, the conversation regarding feminism under our side of the house would still be better, precisely because the glorification of the Summer of Women thing is what generates urgency for these other branches of the feminist movement to highlight the causes. Yes? Precisely because the public conversation is
dominated by the fact, hey, look at Taylor Swift, she is successful. Now you have a chance to counter that very dominant narrative and say, okay, we can talk about Taylor Swift. What about the woman in Iran? Without Taylor Swift being glorified, you won't even have that conversation because we have already established the status quo is so heavily dominated by this anti-feminist movement. This attention to women's issues in general is the prerequisite for more complex conversations that involve even less visible minorities within women as a general umbrella term to happen within the public. And you need this public conversation to happen at a global scale for it to have an impact, because ultimately the feminist movement in advocating for tangible benefits for women is a time-consuming process. You need to advocate, you need to legislate, you need to vote, you need to raise awareness. All of these things demand a lot from the feminist movement itself. So if you are not getting this win, if you are not getting the sense that, hey, as a feminist movement, we can at least get some wins, people are less likely to want to do that. Women advocates, both men and women, are less likely to want to canvass, less likely to want to spend their time on social media saying, hey, look about the woman in Iran, whatever. Because, well, we have already established they are very often they are under attack whenever they advocate for women's issues on social media, things like that. At the very least, by glorifying this pop culture phenomenon, you gain a starting point from which the feminist movement can advance its immediate goal. We do not think that an inclusive feminist movement necessarily needs to be one that roots out all the most specific issues, like what the opening government seems to characterize. You do not need to say, hey, you don't have to be independent as a woman. Precisely because in the status quo, that might not even be an option at all, at least by countering that narrative with an extreme example. Even if we accept the characterization of the opening government, it is still better you are opening up the conversation. And as I have established, pop culture is the one thing that crosses linguistic barriers, it is the one thing that crosses national barriers. Without the glorification of the Summer of Women, you would not have, say, for instance, as much of a public conversation regarding the Women's World Cup. You do not have as much conversation regarding the fact that, hey, this is an election year. In a lot of elections, the number of women representatives being elected are going down. This is the prerequisite. We do not see why it is within the interest of the feminist movement to oppose this movement. So, what have the opening opposition told you? We have established that yes, there is a very, very, very important urgency here because status quo is dominated by a very strong anti-feminist movement, and pop culture is the only medium in which the feminist movement can regain foothold and steer the public conversation back towards women's issues, regardless of whether or not these conversations are about privilege, are about race, are about the fact that all of these women are liberal Americans. Hey, at the very least, now you have more urgency from these other feminist movements and more platform for them to counter that glorification. Without that glorification, you would not even have that. Therefore, we are very proud to oppose.
I thank to the leader of opposition for that fine speech. Before we start the next speaker, I just would like to remind everyone to check first whether or not the microphone functions well. In case there is an issue during your speech, feel free to stop your speech. I also would like to stop the timer as well so you can repair your microphone and then we can just continue with the good conditions. All right, with that being said, I'd like to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Check. I'm sorry I'm wearing mask because I'm currently sick and I don't want everyone here to get sick as well. So, am I audible enough? Check. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. The whole idea of opening opposition is that they want bigger reach so that everybody could actually listen to what is feminism is. Sure, you can do that and it can be beneficial if what you said is actually really fruitful and it's not really, really harmful, like my first speaker have told you. Why then? Let's weigh. Let's just, consider the fact that they could reach so many people in the world. The weighing is we sacrifice reach and in the purpose of getting better, advocacy. Because at the end of the day, sure, people are going to be, listening to this advocation much more because, right, Taylor Swift has so many followers and also the, Summer of Women is very, very famous. But at the end of the day, there is going to be shifting in this discussion of talking about what a woman should do or, what actually feminism is into the Summer of Women itself. The one that's going to be highlighted, it's not the right way to do feminism, but of how great Taylor Swift is, of how great Beyonce is, of how great Margot Robbie is in during of the filming of Barbie, which is apparently right in status quo. You can see a lot of Swifties glorifying Taylor Swift as their god, for example, which is going to be happening on their side of the house. Sure, there's going to be discussion more globally, but there's going to be shift in discussion, which is very bad, because at the end of the day, as a feminist, you don't want that to be happening. You want people to actually understand what is the current situations and what is feminist movement are, and you want as feminist movement for women to actually be fulfilled without actually fulfilling a certain criteria, such as you need to be independent or you don't have to actually need women in your life at the end of the day. That is a trade-off, and that is very important because at the end of the day, there is different type of women. There is conservative women, for example. There is women that wanted to be at home and be a housewife and be happy about it. But because there is this Summer of Women, they are going to be asking to themselves, am I doing right or am I be an independent woman like my idol is? So yeah, better, larger advocation is not really, really important in this debate. But yes.
How likely is it that conservative women who in the very first place value traditional values would be swayed by this?
Indonesia is a largely conservative nation, but can you see how many Swifties using hijab, for example, that are championing Swifties from the very first place? That is very likely because one, there is FOMO. There is actually a trend that forces you to actually watch and be included in certain movements because your friends are doing it, your relatives are doing it. You are going to feel left out if you're not following this kind of movement. So yes, it is very possible in the conservative areas to actually adhere to these ideas. But yeah, let's extend to my other point, which is at the end of the day, why in the current status quo, feminist movement is enough. Sure, we cannot force every man or bastard man to actually adhere to feminist movement, right? So who is the actors that we need to protect or to make sure that they are supporting our movement? One, support of allies. What is allies? Men who supports feminist movement. Men like me, for example, who thinks that women can be great. A man who thinks that okay, women can be everything that what they want, that women can do whatever they want, right? How then, at the end of the day, these allies are those who need to be protected by how? A, they support causes because of the soft approach, but not because of we are forcing them to actually understand the feminist ideas, but by soft approach. For example, okay, women can do great stuff. Your ideas about how terrible women is not true because the fact on the field is that women could be president, for example. Women can be great like Mayudi Ayunda, for example. The parallel case of extreme feminist movement would be in the same like, when we talk about woke movement in status quo. In status quo right now, there's a decreasing amount of support of wokeism and liberalism, for example. Because why? Because exactly now, woke person in America do rally that is actually hampering the economical activities in the United States of America. Hence, the allies are shifting their minds because now they feel harmed by the radical movement itself. So how we weigh this? A, on opposition side of the house, there's going to be slippery slope of not being liked. Because we already established this kind of soft approach by feminist movement that at the end of the day, sure, we are not as terrible as what they like, but when you risk yourself for being, by just achieving a larger pool of people, you are going to be having a slippery slope of not being liked. At the end of the day, the support would be like, because of the idea that hey, a woman is not as bad and as what my grandpa said, for example. A woman isn't as, keras kepala as what my grandpa said. By being radical, it proves what their parents said to them. It proves what the conservative, environment are saying to them. Like, look, at the end of the day, woman is terrible, for example. They don't want us to be part of their life, for example. They said that we are the cause of their problem, for example, which is, at the end of the day, is highly debatable as well, right? At the end of the day, there is a high likelihood of these allies to shift and change their mind in order to support feminist movement at the end of the day. So, how you weigh this? On opening government, we prioritize the actors who is more important, which is the allies itself, right? Which is those who are supporting our causes from the very first place. On the other side of the house, there is a high likelihood of them, not supporting your movement at the end of the day. But two, let's talk about how then, on our side of the house, it's going to make women feel safe. Because A, like I've told you before, there is cultural side. The parallel case of this is the Four Nose movement in South Korea, which is very, very rejected by the men there, right? Because it's too radical, because the Four Nose movement is basically like you don't have to marry men, you don't have to be in a relationship with men, and so on and so forth, right? Why then this is very bad? It affects livelihood of women at the end of the day. There is going to be rejections of society. Your parents will shun you because, hey, we have this value. Why then you start all of a sudden, distract yourself from our conservative value? The impact of this are, one, you rely on your parents for emotional and money support, for example. Once you are, making them mad or making them angry, you are going to be, in a problem when they stop their support on you. On our side of the house, we prioritize safety of this woman first. Conservative Muslim, for example, obliged to stay at home, for example. Sure, you can change it gradually by the current movement that happens in status quo. Then, after you prioritize the safety of this woman, you can, expand your reach into as many people as possible. Okay, again, I'm so sorry for, if there is terrible languages that I've said, but yeah, propose.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for that fine speech. Not like to welcome Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
Give me a moment to put down my notes. This is audible, yes? Women wanting to be independent is a good thing, and them picking what they want is also a good thing. This is the framing that we want to bring, a completely opposite of what OG is trying to say. We say that trying to push for these things are actually a part of feminist goals. Why? Because we believe in women's individual rights, and that's why we think that even being a stay-at-home mom is okay. But why is this bad on government side? Because when you oppose it, you mean that you just look inconsistent to the rest of the world, looking inconsistent of what feminism actually want, because you naturally want men to also respect women's choices, like, for example, how women want to be independent on what they, for example, also doing what they want, for example, things like their life, their career, and so on. But by doing these things, like opposing it, will actually make yourself look inconsistent, have less allies, just you'll like self-destruct, right? Because people will just not know what you actually want to begin with. But on the POI, for example, on what a woman or Iran would like want to think about is that what alternative do you have anyways, is especially that has such a big global impact, we don't see a much better alternative, right? So well, let's actually look at two other things. They said that, for example, how this will actually shift the conversation from like actual women to Taylor Swift and Beyonce. Notice that they are still women anyways, and they're successful women. We say that these successful women can actually be a good representation of, for example, what type of things that you can do in life. Things like, for example, what women actually can, like even little girls can actually opt into this media. Things like, I want to watch Barbie and I can feel like I have a place in society. It's feasible for me to do this. It's feasible for me to be successful in my life. I want to do whatever I want. I want to be more than just what society tells me. This is only accessible than on like this, Summer of Women, right? This visibility, these things, this representation is so important. Why? Because one, these little girls, again, are able to, for example, see that they have a place in society, but they also on what is feasible in their lives. Because why? Your worldview is then either one, only from your friends or family, which is especially harmful if they're conservative, right? So that you can have a different like perspective. So it's not just an echo chamber of what your family or your friends or your like church or something tells you that you can and only be a stay-at-home like wife or something like that, right? So this educates even little girls that what they can do. But second, this also educates like other kids, like boys and so on, that women do have a big role in society, that they're just not some placeholder, they're just not some stay-at-home mom or someone to be a wife, someone to be a mom, but also someone that can achieve great things in life. They have great like impacts on society. This is the type of things that we want. Notice that these types of things actually do, these types of movements, a type of educating people, it's not something that you achieve in a month or only a few months or only a summer in this case, right? That's precisely why we need this glorification, because we want people to still talk about it for months, even perhaps like a couple of years and things like that, right? This is so important because you don't change people's perspective. You don't change like kids' education just by like having like a few months of doing this, right? But notice here, they try to mention to you about how stay-at-home moms will doubt themselves and things like that, right? And like whatever. First is that feminism advocate for freedom of choice. But then notice how also that like feeling FOMO and stuff like that, the choice is not made in a vacuum. That choice, regardless of whether you want to be a stay-at-home mom or whether you want to pursue your career and things like that, happens because you have influence. The same exact opposite happens when, for example, women is surrounded by stay-at-home moms will also feel FOMO to be a stay-at-home mom as well, right? So at the very least here is that Summer of Women can be that new narrative at the very least, even if, for example, they cannot pursue it because, you know, maybe the community is so conservative, but at the very first place, they feel like there's some type of like catharsis so that you have a safe space that you can, for example, talk about it or feel invalidated for your feelings, right? But they try to also mention, OG tried to mention to you about like men. Why, for example, they are the people that we should actually focus on. We say this is wrong. Your constituency at the very first place is women, right? You are beholden to women the very first place, the very people you are here to protect. Here that we say you should prioritize women, but suddenly like how men are going to opt out of the movement is actually also like not explained, right? At the worst case possible here is that even, for example, this doesn't bring a very significant change. At the very least, these types of like narratives and so on can be a safe space for women, even if, for example, like these people in conservative places can feel like these the narrative and the feminist movement to begin with is a safe space. Because if, for example, you tell them that, hey, don't actually pursue your career, you're going to make your like community mad, I think that I would feel more betrayed by my own movement. The fact that is that you should focus on women. We want women to opt into these movements to begin with, right? When you push away these women, you're actually destroying yourself. You're doing self-sabotage, right? No, thank you. But note here is that when it's even more harmful when women opt out of these movements. Why? Because one, you'll look like you're inconsistent, but second is that when it comes to, for example, things like election time, when it comes to making policies and so on, is that these very constituencies that are probably and most likely going to be much more stable and actually stronger in general than like some random men is the ones that you're actually going to push away. You're going to lose out, for example, when we want to do things like elections and so on here. But also on conservatism. No, thank you. OG wants them to basically stay conservative, at least under our side, we can mention to you how then we'll actually bring better representation and things like how this can better like have a safe space and so on, right? That even if, for example, they try to mention to you the worst case scenario, I think people can generally know whether or not you should be super outspoken about if your community is super like conservative, right? So I'm not suddenly going to like randomly scream out like, oh, I'm like screw all of your like ideals and so I'm going to be completely different. I think that generally women also know not to do that. But then why is it so important that people generally have this glorification, right? Because one, I already mentioned it takes a very long time to do these things, right? To have people talking about women to begin with is something that we need. We need also global attention, right? At the very least now we can capitalize on this trend, this conversation, this glorification woman. So why? In the future, when this, for example, dies down or something like that, at least it provides a platform for other issues, other conversations, other glorifications that can happen. Why? Because you need to, have, at the very first place, have a positive image and positive conversation on women and their issues and so on. Things like other issues can be brought out for people to opt into this change and things like that. And women we need to have women as a main topic in society that we can feel like we can actually contribute, we can influence and stuff like that. Because the great people that OG tries to champion here will only opt into if you feel like they can actually make a change and they won't get judged by it. Precisely when these things are viewed in a good light, you won't be judged and it's actually popular for all these reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Leader of Opposition, for that fine speech. Now to open the case in closing, half Member of Government. Here.
Boleh pinjam timer nggak ya? Oh, sure. Ada yang to your warning, this might contain really sensitive content because I want to talk about things such as sexual harassments and probably all the things that women experience the vast majority of their life. Everything that I probably will say after this is not representing my personal points of view, but rather for just perspective of the debate. Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. When we became a family, we never did a cheerful party full of color, wasting money in front of the faces of people who are grieving. The problem within feminists is that it's not as simple as opening debate, which is independence versus dependence, because both are equally valid, because as women you can choose either options freely. But I feel like this debate must not concentrate upon the general perspective about whether support dependence or independence is good, but rather the way that feminists face lots of problems beyond what is seen from the surface. And these are the problems that closing government will identify. What are they? The first thing is the abortion, in which most of the individuals and state failed to give protection. The cases of rape victims in 2023, the numbers of abortion constantly increase. Or the Masha Amini, a pretty girl in Iran, who were violated by the police when she did not wear any hijab. Closing government will not hear and debate in very templatic ways like opening, because I feel like swaying gray area and progressive women and try to change conservative society is incredibly unrealistic. We will go out of debate by proving why there are other issues that need much more our spotlight, and we will win this debate by proving why these actors actually need validations more over any benches in this debate, and proving why, if you already protected this actor, you can also win in the metrics of buy-in, swaying all the people that side of opening debate want to argue. The first thing that I want to prove in the debate is principle. Who can resonate with the discussions? It's not like the entire woman women in society and the side of oppositions, but rather the elite women who actually understand the pop culture, who have an access to watch Barbie. Therefore, these are the type of individuals who are not miserable. They are actually rich and they are actually privileged enough because they never experience oppressions or discriminations. Therefore, they live under the moderate society that actually give women privilege. They probably already did breaking the glass ceiling like in US. Therefore, they are probably not the vulnerable women that need appreciation, unlike what opening oppositions claim. Therefore, the case of appreciation at best is not exclusive because you can still appreciate them by temporarily saying that Taylor Swift is awesome, but this does not require any forms of glorification. Therefore, the most important burden that closing oppositions need to answer, why this must be glorified. Because the essence of glorification of Summer of Women is not like you will likely to providing appreciations, but rather in closing government, we will claim that it is a method to wash the hands of the prominent figures who are immoral, who already provide a lot of failures. What are they? Firstly, the state who constantly never gave any forms of protection to the victims of sexual harassment that quantified even in our regions. But secondly, the state who failed to give protections to the women who want to access abortions. Or thirdly, the allowance of patriarch individuals who constantly oppress women because they think that feminists are too tired in terms of combating this. Therefore, they choose shortest path to claim glory by explaining that Summer of Women must appear. But fourthly, the incompetence of tokenistic politicians like Kamala Harris, who made tokenistic ideas saying that she will defend women just for the sake of campaign. All of this particularly explain that in principle, this is morally incorrect because Summer of Women appear as a defense of mistakes and constant failures by prominent figures and state that allows tokenistic figures to appear. Therefore, you cannot hold them accountable under their side of the house. Therefore, this bit top half definitely, because irrespective of the debate whether independency is good things or bad things, what we explain as closing government is that the motives when you want to glorify the Summer of Women is already immoral in and of itself. Therefore, we must oppose this. But secondly, even if you cannot buy the independent morality that we explain, but the comparative is that we're going to prove why we can't protect the vulnerable actor in here. Because I would argue that as feminists, we would like to concentrating the vast majority of our resources to traditional or the failures that state has provided to apparently protect women. Why this is likely? Because absent this glorification, the trend that will appear is the traditional trend, because this is the most important issues, because you can wave riding this by making sure that the other issues can coexist altogether. Like you can also defend the case of women who are being oppressed by also wave riding the case of internal war in Iran, or you can also claim that there are a lot of victims of women who have been oppressed by the existential terrorism and so on, like in Pakistan or in Palestine, that harm women, that say women is just tool of reproduction so that their invasion can constantly going on. Therefore, this is where our comparative matter, because these are the type of individuals who feminists must protect because they are in a vulnerable state. No one will eventually protect them. They are in a constant trauma, hoping someone will eventually stand for them. Therefore, our case matters because you do not need to validate Beyonce because they can have anything that probably this word can offer to her specifically. What you need to validate is Masha Amini, which one support for them can give the light of hope. Therefore, the weighing is clear. It is not about whether giving support is good, but rather which actor the feminists must support and feminists must endorse, because feminists have the ability to control media. They have a lot of resources. They have famous individuals. They have media and influencers that eventually will help them and twist the narrative. Therefore, we answer the most important burden. Whom actor they should get feminist support, we distribute that proportionally to the one who need them. Opening.
We do not understand how this is mutually exclusive. You can both glorify the Summer of Women and also highlight Ashami. In fact, you have feminized how more likely.
No, because if that's the case, then you cannot achieve one important narrative that you will send to the society, because the focus is equally distributed to the Masha Amini and the Summer of Women. Therefore, you cannot be half-stands by proving that those two things can mutually exclusive, because if not, then your glorification does not really matter and do not have any value. Thirdly, let's talk about the buy-in. I feel like the glorification Summer of Windows, creating the overtone windows that shift the standard as saying women are not vulnerable anymore. Because what will you embrace in every social media discussions is that women's success, most of women already succeed, therefore they are probably not vulnerable anymore. They can what concern, they can eventually declare a successful event, they can living their life freely. Therefore, this create an incentive for multiple supporters to opt out from feminist movement. Who are they? The gray area who think that feminists should be supported. But now they will change their minds saying that feminists probably do not need money, do not need aid and so on. But also the ally, the men who fought for feminists, because I feel like the men fought for feminists for the sake of they also get harmed by patriarchal society, because probably their moms and their sisters also getting abused, but also they probably probably pressure for the existence of masculinity standard. Therefore, all of this shows that men and other forms of supporters actually support feminists because they feel there's an intense harm of patriarchy. What's happening under their side, when you actually endorse women succeed, then you are unlikely to combat patriarchy anymore because you feel that the woman already surpassed the patriarchy standard, and therefore you probably do not need any more help as a woman. Therefore, this also will create the dissonance from artists or influencers who probably feel that the feminists already give them tokenistic idea, who probably feel that probably I shouldn't support this movement anymore. The comparative is that in our side, sure thinks that we can alienate Beyonce, but she is not the biggest contributor because she doesn't feel the reliability or the relatability within these movements because she probably grows under the echo chambers of successful women and so on. Therefore, they do not need protections. What we explain under our side of the house is that we will protect the one who actually contribute the most to our movements, the people who have been oppressed for far too long, the people who contribute much to our movements. They are the one that we must hear and therefore proud to stand for women.
Thank you, member of government, for that fine speech. Not like to invite member of opposition. Here.
Tes, oke. Tes, oke. Okay. Before going to my argument, several rebuttals to the opening first. I think opening didn't really characterize what is the interest of the feminist movement, which is very crucial because this is an actor motion. Understand that you have to explain why the feminist movement wants to support or doesn't want to oppose the glorification of the Tes, oke. Oke. 024 tadi.
Yeah, you have two options. You want to restart or you can just.
Oh, boleh restart.
Ya, karena belum 1 menit.
Oh, oke. Boleh restart. Oke. Oke. Before I start my argument, several rebuttals towards the opening. I think what they lack is that they didn't explain in explicit what is the interest of the feminist movement. Understand that you need to explain why the feminist movement cares so much that they shouldn't oppose the glorification of women in summer in 2023, right? First of all, I'm going to go to OG first. They didn't really explain what is the interest of feminist movement. They only said that like they don't want women of 2023 to be the agency of radicalization, but understand that it's going to be much more worse in your side, which I'm going to explain because OG is similar with CG. And you didn't explain also why, when you do oppose the glorification, what is the benefit that's going to happen exclusive to your side. But also to preempt, I think CG actually, their POI talking about how does this actually benefit the women in conservative countries like Indonesia and Iran. Understand that the moment that they don't want to be feminist is because they think that to be a feminist you have to have extreme ideals. Now with the women of 2023, it feels like a breath of fresh air because it advertises that women can be successful with your husband in the picture. You don't need to have that extreme beliefs to be a feminist anymore. So that is the exclusive that is happening, and why women in Summer of Women actually happened in 2023 and not years ago, right? And also what we want to contribute, which is very important to CO, is that OO didn't explicitly explain what is the interest of feminist movement to not oppose the glorification, but also what is the picturization of the harm if we do oppose it, right? So the framing is that the entertainment industry is very patriarchal, and this is actually key and the prerequisite why Summer of Women is actually successful, right? In the past, it has been patriarchal. Now it acts as an agency to trigger people to talk about feminist movements, both which are basic cases or even to the extreme cases, right? Later I'm going to engage to CG. So our burden is why the glorification of the summer of 2023 will actually bring more benefit to the feminist movement. Now, I want to explain the picturization of glorification because this is also lacking in the opening. People in the movement will support the movie and the music, right? Not segregating those who watch and like the media, not shaming them in social media, but rather making it viral in social media as a good depiction of womanhood in the 21st century. And why do we want this as feminist movement? You need the exposure. It is very important because feminist movement isn't heavily supported in the past. Even in countries like America, there are still people highly criticizing feminist movements because of its extreme campaign, right? This exposure through the Summer of Women is actually a good strategy to attract those who weren't in the feminist movement in the first place. Why do we want to pander in the general society? If the picturization, if you want to oppose it, is that clearly you're going to keep people in the dark and they will still keep on believing that feminist movement is radical. They are anti-men. Now, this is what we don't want, right? We want to change that mindset in the society. Now, the prerequisite why Summer of 2023 was so successful is because of that agency of entertainment industry that wasn't gendered to begin with. The creative industry has become that fair ground to rebrand the feminist movement into something that is more inclusive and that is going to attract the potential supporters. Now, going on to my first argument, what is the impact of glorification, right? We have to highlight this. The Summer of Women in 2023 sparked a lot of discourse from both supportive and opposing sides. However, this leads to the glorification of extreme success and popularity of powerful women in media. Since it exposed the general public, the concepts of feminism isn't that extreme, it's actually much more unique now. For example, the Barbie movie brought the concept that Barbie does want Ken in her life, right? She doesn't oppose or hate the idea of Ken. She doesn't want all of the Ken to be gone, right? This new mindset shows how much of a difference the new concept of feminism in the past compared to now. Today, feminist movement is fighting for the minorities that includes both men and women without demonizing a particular gender. For example, Beyonce and Taylor Swift music also has music that talked about womanhood and the struggles of being women, even so far as portraying sometimes women can be toxic as well. But that's the point, right? We don't want to demonize a certain race or a certain gender, right? These new concepts show the diversity of the feminist movements and has gained a lot of supporters in the public, which is why it's called Women of Summer of Women 2023. And it only happened today, not because years ago, right? This is why the glorification is important to the movement. There is a trickle-down effect. It acts as an agency to advertise the goal of the movement, right? We see that the Summer of Women has boosted the confidence and bravery to talk about the struggles of womanhood and minorities in social media. This is clearly engaging to CG's side, where they said that like, oh, feminists doesn't, there are a lot of feminists that doesn't support the minorities. We believe that this is a generalization. There are actually support, but the problem is it's not covered in media. It's not considered as mainstream. Through this entertainment industry, people are going to garner a lot of supports to join the feminist movement, and therefore you are going to have a lot of people talking about cases that are extreme going in Indonesia and Iran, right, later. So this also sparked a cultural discourse, right? This shifted the mindset of society when looking at feminist campaigns. They are more welcoming and has rebranded into something that is more inclusive and diverse, not only talking about race, not talking only color, but it's also talking about gender and sex, right? This is also economic impact. There is also economic impact through the glorification, since it has proved that now women can become a successful director on par with men that has been dominating in the film industry. But what is so unique in our contribution? We will explain the unity of the movement. In government side, the feminist movement doesn't have that agency and the platform to voice their needs and advertise their goals. They will be forced to use radical options to attract the media attention. They will collect support with extreme ideals since they can't guarantee the support from the general public. In your side, cognitive dissonance will erupt because people who are already in the feminist movement will be forced to hate, to not support powerful and successful women in the entertainment industry, which makes them doubt what was the point of feminist movement if it wasn't about supporting women and minorities. In our side, yes, people might be blindly supporting women without looking what exactly their intentions or whether they are actually giving the money to minorities, but at the very least, we have given that agency to advocate, right? We have garnered a lot of people to come to our side, to collect those ideas, and therefore we have the agency and the platform to give those who are still vulnerable. Understand that the public doesn't just see, just because they're popular, oh, that means they're not vulnerable anymore. Society doesn't believe that just as it is, right? So what is our clear conclusion? We have explained why our contribution is so important and so distinct with the opening, and we have engaged clearly to CG's side about their macro harm towards the feminist movement. We are proud to oppose. Thank you.
I thank the member of opposition. Now government whip Pierre here.
Trigger warning. I may talk about some sensitive issues. I do not mean to offend anyone. So yeah, I'm sorry in advance. But also, I assume I'm allowed to use my own timer? Cool. Wait. Setting up my timer first. Okay. When rights of reproductive health in US has been shifted away, when women's freedom and safety are threatened by people like Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson, who have the backing of the Gen Z men across the world, when you have women beaten to death in Iran for the police for not wearing hijab, then you want to celebrate the tour of billionaire celebrities and movies made by billionaires, producers, directors, and artists. Feminist movement should be ashamed of this issue. 2 points of clarification under my speech. Firstly, what is the counterfactual that we are offering? We are not going to glorify it. So if Swift have their own tour, then cool, we don't really care. But we are not going to condemn it either, so I don't understand OO's case about the feminist movement being hypocrite to begin with, because it is not our fiat to defend. Secondly, how are we going to support the vulnerable actor, like Jose said? 3 things. 1, donate to women lawyer in Iran, for example, to protect women's rights. 2, building safe houses for the victims of abuse. 3, create the attention through the social media for those efforts to create more donors to begin with. This is exactly what CG will do on our side. Firstly, I'm going to engage with CO. They're going to talk about 2 things. Firstly, the patriarchal entertainment industry, and secondly, about moderacy. Firstly, about the patriarchal entertainment industry. This is a pure, certified, fake matter. The top 3 artists in Spotify is women. Hollywood, New York, LA is the capital of entertainment, and they are very progressive with democratic mayor. You have the events such as Me Too movement, where women are willing to stand up and speak up. So I don't see the urgency to protect these women to begin with. But even if it is true, the victim of abuse in conservative society are more important exactly because they have no alternative. The comparative is that Taylor Swift can cry if she gets catcalled in her private plane. But we are going to flip this argumentation by saying that the moment you highlight these artists, you are focusing the attention on the celebrities, while those who are prone, your makeup artists, your cinematographers, your staffs and secretaries are being forgotten. This is important because Jose brought the context on the failure of feminist movement in 2023. You are losing focus on those you needed to protect, therefore you are likely to fail to protect the one you needed the most. Hence the patriarchy will be worse off under CO. Secondly, about moderacy. I don't see this as something that is important because, again, the nature of social movement is that you have to be radical. You have to create buzz and the discourse. You have to create the attention so that the news actually caught up to you, and you are able to shift the Overton window to ensure that people actually normalize your point of view to begin with. And it is already successful in the past. You've seen the civil rights movement or women being able to vote in the first place. Therefore, you have a strong precedence of extreme movement gaining success. I don't see why we have to moderate for now. And in matter of fact, I'm going to argue that exactly because we are trying to be moderate, we are going to be complacent. Therefore, the failure context in 2023 with all of the context that Jose already brings, their case taken down. But moving on to OO, they're talking about two things: demoralization and the discourses within society. Firstly, the demoralization. I think demoralization is exactly what was needed rather than the distraction, because Jose already explained the context of failure of feminist movement in 2023 with the abortion, masa amini, and whatnot. This is important for three reasons. Firstly, the aura of complacency in feminist movement that is prevalent in status quo. You empowering the complacency under the opposition when you are glorifying this. You are not holding feminist movement accountable for each failure. But secondly, the limited attention span on the gray area. If you glorify them, you're probably going to post it on TikTok, for example. Well, the Swift issue, the Swift tour, is more eye-catching than building a new safe house, for example. So she is going to won out rather than the more important issue. So I don't see the point of OO by saying that this is something that is exclusive. Well, something that is not exclusive. While this is not only half stance, this is simply not true because of the competing attention that you have to face while campaigning on social media. But thirdly, this is exactly something that is urgent to fight back and not lose more rights for women, because when you distract, this is a blatant shifting of narrative, because the overton will be shifting from 2023 become the year of failure of feminist movement to 2023 being somewhat mixed or successful year. Exactly when it is the tour that saved the feminist movement in 2023, they would pump up more resources. They would donate for Taylor Swift to tour more, or donate to directors to create more Barbie, for example, or others, while the one who needed the most, the victim of the oppressive law, the abuse, and whatnot, are going to be left behind. The counterfactual that we are offering is simple. We are going to keep a deep evaluation of the feminist movement and its action in and of itself. Therefore, the feminist movement are able to focus their effort to re-strategize and trying to find a better way forward. Yes.
Posting about the Eras Tour and building a safe house has such a different barrier of entry that I do not see how this is competitive. How can you answer this burden?
Like I said, you are going to compete for the attention because people's attention span are low. If you are going to create a news between Taylor Swift, for example, and building of safe houses, people are going to be attracted to watch Taylor Swift TikToks rather than feeling the urgent to donate for those safe houses, for example. So I don't see this point to begin with. But moving on to the counterfactual again. Does this guarantee a win to re-strategize? No, but at least something needs to be done, and something will be done under CG. Because when you hold into account the feminist movement have better incentive to better effort, lobby, to build, to make better policies, because successful feminist movement is simply good for women in general. But secondly, regarding the discourses, Jose already explained that the discourse will be elitist. This is important because the lack of relatability. To begin with, the woman who the feminist movement seeks to protect, your single mothers, your women in conservative areas, they are not going to feel empowered. Matter of fact, they are going to be disempowered, because when you empower someone, you disempower others. This is what feminist movement is all about. You want to disempower man who is oppressive with patriarchy to empower women. Now, who are you empowering now? The elites. This is unfair because they don't need empowering to begin with, but also backlashing to your own principle of empowering vulnerable women to begin with. Taylor Swift, Beyonce are not vulnerable under any measures. So it is going to be multiple times worse because the discourses evolve around the elites and not going to help your average Janes. Moving on to OG. Why CG is better than OG? Two things. One, they want to say that this will create buy-in to the male people, but they don't explain why men are offended by the summer of women to begin with. This is important because their prerequisite of their case can run is this, and validating women. Jose already explained better. I hope this is taken for granted. So proud to propose.
I thank to the Gov Whip for that fine speech. Now to invite opposition's whip here.
Test. Trigger warning, I will be talking a lot about situation of women, especially in vulnerable areas. Going to start in 3, 2, 1. This debate should not talk about in vacuum, right? We think that summer of 2023 doesn't not only benefited the celebrities that CG somehow want to brought, right? Somehow about Taylor Swift, but Beyonce in the end of the day. What do we say? We're talking about people who got also benefited both socially and economically coming from the summer of 2023. It is those starling women who are selling coffee in front of the National Stadium of Singapore during Taylor Swift Eras Tour, for example. But understand that in order government's case to run is to have an agency, right? Because the prerequisite for you to shift this overtone window, especially in governments, especially when the government are very much conservative, is to have an agency that somehow feminism is an idea that is accepted by a lot of people, or at least to certain people, which is a feminist who can be the driving factor. This is something that has been done in Indonesia for pushing the undang-undang TPKS, for example, exactly because there is a feminist movement who have been very much loyal to this, and there's no disengagement towards the feminist movement. So what's the exclusivity of CO? I think that we provided the community analysis of how the community will react if we oppose the glorification, right? Which is the cognitive dissonance and the ambiguity that is independent on the principal level of feminism, right? But secondly, I think that we explained the process analysis as to why this trend will be manifested, which is the inclusion of women's and acceptance of women'shood idea, especially in the general public society, right? But secondly, I think that all government case cannot run because they don't give you the picturization as to how you are going to oppose it, right? We think that we'll argue that you have to say to this individual who likes Taylor Swift that, hey, you are anti-feminist. If you are a Taylor Swift fan, you cannot be a feminist to begin with, right? So therefore, we think that our case is very much impactful, especially towards the feminist movements, especially the ones in developing countries, especially the one in conservative societies such as Iran that they want to portray. But yeah, let's do on the weighing then. Why does we will win in this debate? I think that opening opposition only explains why does the summer of 2023 is going to be benefiting for the feminist movement, but fail to analyze who are the actors that feminists want to pander, which is exactly being brought by CG, that is the one that Masa Amini and so on whatnot, right? Because NCO's analysis about how it's going to be harmful and picturization it, that if we oppose the glorification, then it's going to create a cognitive dissonance impact and so on and so forth. But yeah, let's talk on the entire case of government. I think that first OG, I think that OG is debated in a vacuum exactly because they fail to characterize the interests of women and exactly the interests of the feminist movement as a whole, right? When they're talking about how that this is somehow so radical in the end of the day, even if that CG considers that it is not very much radical, we think that we are going to neutralize this by saying that the stance of feminism has always been extreme by the general or extreme seen by the general society, i.e. fighting for the black women's equality during the Jim Crow or segregation or something that CG want to possess, right? But let us flip this. We think that summer of 2023 has been very moderate and generally acceptable by the general society, i.e. Taylor Swift talking about songs directly about her exes and not making a generalization about men, for example, or Beyonce promoting women's independency, or but our analysis that it has been accepted by the general society means that it is not radical, therefore it is a way for feminists to promote their ideas which are more radical that CG want to bring in this debate. Secondly, when they're talking about how it's going to be misinterpretation of feministic ideas that is going to be harmful towards women and the counter narrative such as anti-feminist movements, for example, right? We think that misinterpretation means that the summer of 2023 has shown an idea that is principally and morally against feminism. But the issue with OG, I think that OG failed to analyze what this interpretation of feminism. We think that feminism means that we have to support all forms of women representation and idea as long as it didn't harm women or against the idea of the equality of women, right? We think that engaging to the idea of harming it's going to direct harm towards women. We think that the counterfactual is that opposing the glorification, it's going to backlash and harming women, especially when you have to concede that you are going to label these women who participated in the trend, which includes that women who are already working and benefited from the trend as being unfeminist, or even mocking them or putting them under the bus because saying that you have been a betrayal towards the feminist movement. That is something that we don't want, right? But secondly, engaging to the idea of the harm of anti-feminist group. We think that the counterfactual is worse because anti-feminist movement and women see feminist movement and women as a monolith group, right? Because then the manifestation of opposing the glorification by feminist movement, which is labeling and mocking Swifties as anti-feminist, which is going to show towards this anti-feminist movement that women are just a group of people who fight against each other, and therefore it creates a loophole for them to criticize and ridicule feminists and women as being inconsistent because they don't want to support each other in the end of the day. But yeah, Thirdly, supporting allies such as feminist men. We think that OG never explained why these men, feminists, are very much detrimental towards the feminist movement. But we think that these allies are important because it gives perception that feminist movement are inclusive towards all gender, right? Therefore, our analysis about how men can be feminists is very important because usually they got exposed by womanhood or feminist idea coming from the entertainment due to the emotional attachment or cult personality by Beyonce or Taylor Swift in the end of the day. But lastly, let's talk about CG then. What does CG brings to this debate? Three things. One, on the principle level, why does elite women are consumer and benefited from the trend? We don't think that's the case because CG debated in a vacuum because they assume that if we glorify a particular trend, then somehow you're going to invalidate the others women issues such as Masa Amini or the Roe versus Wade, for example, right? We think that in fact, the counterfactual is that the summer of 2023 also benefited women who came from middle class and vulnerable women. Two things. One, we think that women small business owners who get benefited from Taylor Swift merchandise during Taylor Swift era tours, for example. But secondly, Black Beehive in Africa who gets inspired to fight against racism due to Beyonce's song that is talking about the struggles of being black people or being proud to become a black woman, for example, right? Therefore, the argument is not exclusive and not comparative, and the comparative is worse because you are going to pick a fight with this Beehive and Swifties who are already becoming a feminist and therefore get the feministic ideas, right? Because exactly there's going to be a much more cognitive dissonance in their side of the house, which is going to create a massive withdrawal between this Twitter stance coming from the feminism. But secondly, about concentrating towards women protection issues and regulations, such as the women in Iran. We think that the prerequisite of these pro-women's regulations, such as abortion and anti-rape laws, is to have an agency. There's to say, we need to gather a lot of people to support and believe in feministic ideas. Understand that women in conservative countries didn't get exposed to feministic ideals or literature due to censorship and brainwashing. Understand that the trend of summer 2023 has been a powerful medium because it involves entertainment, and conservative societies cannot censor or oppose it because the bargaining power that these powerful moments held. I.e., Barbie movies is still being shown in Brunei due to its economic benefits towards the cinema industry, for example, right? But the trade-off is that feminist or womanhood ideas will be shown in these areas. Lastly, talking about shifting in the Overton windows. Even if it will shift the Overton windows, but understand it is a big burden. Two things. In developing countries and conservative countries, it will shift the Overton windows in a way that it's going to be focuses more on the women's economy, right? Because the trend has created a demand for women's small businesses or dancers for Beyonce to be flourished. But lastly, in a countries that is so oppressive against women, such as Iran, we think that regardless of this trend, we think that the government of Iran will still likely to be very conservative, precisely because feminism doesn't have a bargaining power. The comparative is that, at least in our side, we are going to acknowledge and support Swifties in Iran, it was going to be the driving force of feminist allyship in Iran. Therefore, out of this reason, very proud to be in this room.
Thank you so much, Opposition Sweep, for that fine speech. That's marked the end of the debate for the round. I think everyone can just leave the room and just will discuss. After everything is done, we are going to call you back for an OA.